Good evening. It's been another night of serious disturbances on the streets of London. In parts of the capital, the mob simply rules. The damage to property is already well into millions of pounds, but a year ahead of the London Olympics, there's also damage to the capital's reputation and to that of the Metropolitan Police, and big questions for David Cameron about how the government is dealing with the rioting. Since the trouble started with a peaceful protest in Tottenham on Saturday, it's spread to London districts as far apart as Enfield, Walthamstow, Oxford Street, Brixton and Harlesden. But it was in Hackney in East London where the worst of today's violence and looting took place. By the end of the afternoon, there was also trouble in Lewisham and Peckham, with cars and buildings set ablaze. And another fire was started tonight in Croydon. As the evening progressed, it was confirmed there had been disturbances in Birmingham city centre. The Prime Minister is cutting short his holiday and will chair a crisis meeting tomorrow, while politicians, police and community leaders have been scratching around for explanations. Some speak of social dislocation, cuts and unemployment, while many say this is simply thieving and wrecking. We begin tonight with the latest from Philippa Thomas, who joins us now from Hackney. And I think while we're talking to you, Philippa, we can see some pictures live from that fire in Croydon. It's quite an extraordinary blaze going on there. Well, what's been happening where you are, Philippa?
Well, Gavin, after an hour of quiet following several hours of standoff between riot police and rioters, in the last 5 minutes, actually, we've just had about 5 van loads of riot police going by just down the road from me. I understand they're making arrests now, heading into a house and pulling people out. So not quiet yet on the streets of Hackney, and the police helicopter has just gone up again as well. And it's not across London, it's not London-wide, but in pockets of London, there is still trouble tonight. That big fire in Croydon raging in a furniture warehouse. That's one of the most dramatic events, Gavin, of the last couple of hours. We also understand there's still some trouble in Tottenham, in Peckham, around Clapham Junction, in Lewisham. Police very much still here in massive numbers, trying to batten down the hatches.
And you've witnessed some of the trouble up close yourself, I think.
Yes, I spent about 3 hours just a bit earlier this evening, Gavin, in a street, well, a couple of streets down here from where we are now at Hackney Police Station. And it was, in microcosm, what's happening across a lot of London. One long, narrow street with rioters at one end, riot police at the other. And we saw the tactics at both sides at the beginning, being with the groups of youths. And you could see them pulling T-shirts across their faces, smashing bottles to get ready, smashing bricks on the pavement so that they had manageable ammunition, and lobbing fire, setting cars on fire and setting wheelie bins on fire. When we went round behind police lines, you could tell they were determined to control the situation by having the advantage of numbers. So maybe 4 dozen rioters, but then there would have been about 200 riot police officers. They had dogs, there were mounted policemen, and for a while they pushed back and back the rioters. And I have to say, as the riot police then pulled out of that street, I was talking to Diane Abbott, the local MP, and I could see over her shoulder looters looting Western Union as a car was on fire next to them. It's been surreal.
Philippa, thanks very much for now, although we'll be having live updates throughout the programme of the situation in Hackney, Croydon and elsewhere. Well, Newsnight's Liz McKean has spent the day on the streets of London trying to figure out what, if anything, beyond criminality really lies behind the rioting. Here's a report.
Rush hour in our capital city. Traffic in Hackney is gridlocked, but not for the usual reasons.
Yeah, more cop cars being bashed up.
Gangs of youths are on the loose, attacking this police car. They're then chased away. This was one of numerous outbreaks of violence. At the same time, this was the scene in the borough of Peckham. More gangs, more fires, all in broad daylight. It wasn't just property at risk. In Lewisham, people flee their homes, clambering over roofs, taking with them whatever they can hold. Back in Hackney, police set up roadblocks to try to contain the rioters.
Well, it might be rush hour, but the whole area has been shut down. All the businesses have closed early. The police have sealed every entrance and exit to Mare Street. Now, a short time ago, the rioters were pushed down here. You can see glass and debris on the road. They've been pushed right back, just over there.
They swept through so fast, some people could only look on. Once again, JD Sports was a target for the looters. This chemist was also hit. I met the pharmacist, still appalled at the attempt to wreck his livelihood.
I was across the road when they pulled the shutters, and they went in several times. Rampage there, I pleaded with them. I said, that's my life. That's all I have in this world. This is my, yeah.
Did they listen to you?
They listened to me. But the most disappointing thing about it, that the police were only about 6 yards away. It's about, what is it?
Could they see what was happening?
They saw what was happening in the very before. So the police, they were more scared of them than I was.
Witnesses described large groups of mixed-race youths, but this was no spontaneous eruption of fury. This shopkeeper had been warned of trouble ahead, her customers told her, and she had time to shut up shop.
It was happening in Enfield, and we'd hear it was happening in Palmer's Green. It was just circling. Everyone knows. Everyone's telling each other where it's going to happen. I think what's happening is they're communicating between each other, and they're just saying, look, this is where it's going to be next, because obviously the youths are deciding where they're going to hit next. And
So were you prepared? Did you know it was
we
coming?
knew, yeah, we knew. We had customers coming in and telling us, look, you better put the shutters down soon because they're coming.
Social media sites are streaming instant information for good and ill. Communities are warning each other of trouble, but rumours can quickly spread. The messaging service of BlackBerry phones has been commonly used by those intent on disorder because it's private, keeping plans off the police radar. Today, the company said it would help with the rapidly expanding investigation. At Tottenham, where the trouble began on Saturday, the high road remained closed. You have to go behind it to see the extent of the damage. The fires are barely out. This film from a mobile phone was recorded by terrified residents, furious at those responsible, but unhappy too with the police response.
Everyone's just doing their own thing. There's no one there to stop anything for a good while.
And what do you make of that?
I just think it's very wrong because what I'm seeing last night, all the police was in Enfield and stuff, and no one was down here on Saturday night to help anyone down here.
It's unbelievable. It's like you'd never expect that to happen in this little community.
Yeah.
It's really horrible.
The people who've lost most are those burnt out of their homes with absolutely nothing. They've come here to the council for help.
This man, who didn't want his face filmed, escaped from his flat with his pregnant wife and baby daughter.
I feel helpless. I had everything I want for in my life. I've never been on benefits. Now I've been pushed to go to benefits. I got a job, but I'm not in the right state of mind to go back to my work because I wouldn't be able to concentrate knowing that my baby hasn't got food to eat, hasn't got anything in the house, nothing.
In what is becoming a persistent criticism of police, this man believes they should have done more to save his home.
There was not enough police there, and there should have been. And another really important point is every 2 weeks Tottenham have a home game and there's hundreds of police and they contain thousands of people, all sorts of people. And that day there was a Spurs game on at 5:15. So there were police in the area and a lot of police in the area. Where were they?
Hi, I'm Nick.
Stuart.
Hi, Stuart.
Stuart later met the Deputy Prime Minister just back from holiday, the most senior politician to have visited the scene.
There's thousands of people that come here with a normal Spurs match. It should have been contained. It should have been sorted out.
We've just been talking about it. I mean, the police will do their review of what actually happened, literally just right here on the high street. Lessons will have to be learned, and then of course there's the independent investigation into the Duggan, into the death of Mr. Duggan. But the frustrating thing, obviously, is everybody in the community. I mean, David and I were talking about this. Everyone's got lots and lots of questions.
Yeah.
Some politicians like ex-Mayor Ken Livingstone are drawing a link between the looting and public spending cutbacks. But others, including the Home Secretary, dismiss it as hooliganism. This journalist and youth worker watched the violence unfold.
There's been a lot of cuts. I know that our local Citizen Advice Bureau have lost 2.5 staff. Connections has closed. That was a place where disaffected young people used to come. And the young offenders workers in the area, they've had all their time cut back, so they can't be doing everyday things with these young people. So they're a group of young people that very few people are engaging with, particularly since the cuts.
But does that explain it then?
No, it doesn't explain the rioting. I'm sorry to say that it was just boisterous, mad behaviour that was all organised on their Blackberries.
For many people in Tottenham, the arsonists have hijacked a burning grievance. The shooting by armed police of a young father last Thursday. His family are demanding answers.
Police are under pressure to explain the circumstances in which Mark Duggan was shot dead during what was supposed to be an arrest operation. The Independent Police Complaints Commission is investigating his death and is waiting for the results of a ballistics test to determine whether he opened fire on police first or not.
Tonight, as the police defend their actions, they face a worsening situation. In Croydon, a furniture store was one of several buildings set alight, while police in the West Midlands are dealing with disturbances in the centre of Birmingham. Since Saturday, there have been more than 200 arrests. This evening, the Prime Minister has abandoned his holiday to return to London.
Liz McKean reporting there. Well, in the course of the day, we asked if a Home Office minister was available to come on the programme, but we were told no one was available, and later we were told that no one from the government could speak to us tonight either. But I am joined by the former Mayor of London and future mayoral candidate Ken Livingstone, youth worker and former Conservative candidate for Hammersmith Sean Bailey, the Deputy Chairman of the Metropolitan Police Federation John Tully, and the Reverend Nims Ubunga, who's from Tottenham. Why do you think this happened?
I think that there is clearly criminality. There's this real problem now with the social network, allows people to come to these riots much more rapidly than they did in the early 1980s. But I've been in about 18 London boroughs this year, spending a day in each, gone into colleges. Young people there are so uncertain about their future. I've been into college in Tottenham where half the kids thought they might not be able to afford to continue their course because the education maintenance.
But that sounds like an excuse, doesn't it? I mean,
it's not an excuse.
A lot of people who can't continue, but don't go and riot.
We can all see it. You can have a whole load of clapped-out politicians come on and denounce criminality. And we can do it again next summer when it happens, or we can find a way to stop it. And I think for the first time, certainly in my lifetime, a generation are growing up completely uncertain about their future. They're not certain they can get a home. They're not certain they can get a job. They see politicians that don't engage with them. You've got to crack down on this, and I got 7,000 extra police in London. If we hadn't got those, this would be out of control tonight.
Sean, a generation, I mean, you work with young people, a generation who feel that many of them have no hope, they can't get on, they can't get a job, they can't perhaps afford to go to university.
There's a lot of things to say about it. Firstly, it's quite horrible to watch people try and make some mileage out of this for their own political thing. It's not about Ken, it's not about 7,000 police as well. These are young people not scared of the police, not concerned about the police. If you see what's happened, these kids have been communicating and picking out the nice places to go and riot. The important thing about that is it's a set of kids doing a particular thing. Most children have nothing to do with this. And to try and link this to the cuts or whatever is just electioneering for whatever election you're trying to fight next. This is a deeper issue about why we don't feel like we can engage our children. Our community should be able to stop this.
So are you saying it's not connected to the cuts at all?
Absolutely
It's got
not.
nothing to do with it?
Absolutely. These kids will not talk to you about that at all. Absolutely not.
The Metropolitan Police have been warning the government all year there was the potential for this. We saw this the last time we went through a real downturn in the economy in the early 1980s. It's not an excuse, but we'd be stupid not to recognise it's part of the cause.
Ken, it is always the business of whoever's in government, red or blue, to look after the future of children, and they try to do that. But you've got to be careful that you don't excuse the behaviour of these children. You must understand the vast majority of young people have nothing to do with this, and the vast majority of young people who are involved are just criminals. If you notice on the BB network, some of my young people showed me this morning, they're picking particular shops, the things that they'd like to own.
Sports shops, for example.
Exactly. What that shows you is that it's organised in a particular manner.
Sports shops?
You can't get over the fact that the last time we had rioting consistently like this was in the early 1980s when we're in the depths of a recession. It's come back. And it's not unique here. It happens in America. It happens in Europe. The government's got to have a programme to make certain you catch the criminals. We've got to stop this nonsense. They're going to get rid of 2,000 police in London next year. But we've also got to be in a position, you've got to give a young generation the hope there's something for them.
You're there, you're in that community where it started, but it started with a peaceful protest. I mean, what do you see as the root causes of this?
First, forgive me, both of you are good friends of mine. It's not a political debate, and let's get politics out of the door, okay? I need to be quite clear about this. I was there, I saw the beginnings of it, and this is not a response just to what happened on that day. It is important that, I was with the families of Mark Duggan, and I heard their cry for clarity of what went wrong in relation to this situation.
In the shooting.
And in relation to the shooting. And they wanted answers. They felt that they hadn't been engaged effectively. And unfortunately, this extended itself for so long.
But how did that actually happen? I mean, they want legitimate answers to legitimate questions. Everybody does.
Yeah.
But how did that suddenly turn into people, you know, looting pairs of trainers from shoe shops?
We've got to be clear about this. It didn't start with looting pairs of trainers. And there are no excuses, but we've got to understand some reasons here. And what we've got to understand, some of these young people feel they've got no stake in society. And they don't feel they're risking anything. But at that time, I'll tell you what happened at that time. 4 or 5 hours waiting outside the police station. That was what happened. Beyond, at the end of which the family said, we're going. We're not getting our answers, and so we're going. So some young people had already BB'd, as we heard Sean say, and some had come in.
It looks to a lot of outsiders as if this is almost recreational rioting. They're having fun. That's what they're doing.
But can I say this? Let's get this right. The first thing that was burnt, the first thing that was destroyed were 2 police cars, and I saw that happen. That was destroyed. That was pushed into the centre. That got burnt up. The next thing that happened was there was chaos on our streets. Now, it escalated.
But are the police a particular target then? Are you saying that the relations with the police are still bad?
The relations with the police need some fixing, evidently so. I mean, Tottenham and in Haringey and with our police and young people, there have been some directions. We've moved forward, but we're not where we need to be.
John, do you accept that relations with the police are still not good for many of these young people, and they feel they have very little stake in society, and burning police cars is one of the first ports of call?
I think most definitely there has been an enormous move forward from the 1980s, the late 1980s, when there was a broken relationship between ourselves as a police service and
doesn't look like that, does it? It looks terrible, and it looks as if the police don't have a grip.
I disagree. I think an enormous amount of effort has been put in by the police service to engage with their local communities. Each ward within the boroughs have their own community police teams, and we work really hard to keep those relationships
Harlesden
going.
Just up the road to Croydon tonight, to something going off in Birmingham as well. I mean, there's pockets of this all over London. They maybe have been engaged for 25 years or more, but it doesn't seem to be working. And people are asking, where are the police?
The police are there. They're doing their utmost to contain it. There are finite resources. Before I was here this evening, I was at the Gold Control Centre in Lambeth. An enormous amount of effort has been put in by senior commanders and the people out on the streets, the people I actually represent, the boys and girls who do the day-to-day job, who've actually got to face what you're seeing on your screens now, and they are really dedicated to that job.
Do you think morale in the police, for example, has taken a big hit? I mean, we've seen the resignation of two very senior officers recently. We know about the News of the World scandal. We know about all these things, and we know about pay. And
we're heading for 3 commissioners in 4 years. That doesn't help. You've got the scandals. You've got the threat. I mean, last year 1,000 jobs were left vacant because of a freeze on recruitment. You've got this proposal to cut 1,900 police. But I have to say I completely agree. It's been a sea change in policing. 30 years ago, it was like an army of occupation. I mean, the black youth talked about rebellion. I mean, the world has dramatically moved on. We had one tragic incident, and I have to say the Trident team have, I think, arrested well over 100 armed criminals without firing a shot.
But then
something went wrong.
Doesn't that undercut your big argument that there are political reasons for this? I mean, it does sound then like simply yobbery, doesn't it?
No, it's not the fault of the police. I'm absolutely clear. I think that policing has had a sea change in this city.
But then why is it the fault of the government?
Well, it's the fault of the government because basically you go all over London. I mean, I was up in Tottenham. Tottenham's had a 9% cut nearly in its government grant. The youth centres are closing. People are seeing all the sort of things that used to rely on going.
Are the lads who are out there rioting tonight, are they the ones who would otherwise be in a youth centre? Because people are going to doubt that.
Well, you see, the reality is this. We've got, obviously, if we talk about youth services, 75% cut in youth services, that's real. If we look And that's the danger. If the press or the politicians look for one simple answer, we're making a big mistake. We're looking at a catalogue of issues, a catalogue of potential failures. We're looking at something that needs to be looked at more robustly. We're looking at the challenges some of our young people have had. And so if we suggest this is just down to cuts, we're making a big mistake.
Sean Bailey.
I think for me, one of the driving issues is in the last 10 to 15 years, we've done so much of our youth about their rights. We've done little about their responsibilities. What I'd say to the young people right now, you're attacking the community you come from.
That's it.
And people at home who are deciding if this is yobbery or not, in my opinion, the large part of it is about yobbery.
And well, what about closing youth centres and so on? Because that's one way of getting people off the streets.
These things are different. We're talking about the attitude of these youth. The comment that most of these kids wouldn't be in a youth centre, you'd have to look at. But we are talking about the fact that our youth feel like they can go and take this risk and we've had nothing to lose. There's two things there. One, some of them genuinely feel disconnected, that's right. But the other is we've encouraged them to take control of the world. We've abdicated part of our young people.
Well, do you think in that sense that they are more violent now because they're more ruthless and they're less fixed in any kind of moral sense?
Absolutely. We spent the last 15, 20 years trying to replace people's families with welfare and all kinds of madness like that. We need to go back to our family structure.
You said at the start of our conversation, you mentioned if we can't get it right this year, we won't get it right next year. That seemed like a nod towards the Olympics. I mean, the thing that people around the world will be looking at this and think it's shameful if one of the greatest cities in the world can't manage to keep the peace on a night like this.
Reverend Nim's right. There's a whole layer of issues here. There is the question, if you're making massive cuts, there's always the potential for this sort of revolt against that. But there's also the problem that you've got policing morale demoralised, the threat that, you know, the best part 2,000 police are going to go immediately, the Olympics is out the way. And I think you've just got to have a real focus on this. The Mayor and the Prime Minister have got to get a grip. They've got to be seen to speak for everybody, not just an elite at the top of society.
What do you want from them when they come back? Because the Mayor is on his way back overnight and the Prime Minister will be back tomorrow too.
We need a commitment that they're going to support the police service. The way they're not going to support us is by implementing their 20% cuts, implementing the Windsor Review on pay and conditions, which will drive morale even further down to what it is at the moment, increasing our pension subscriptions.
People will understand that this is of deep concern to the police, but there's a situation on the streets tonight which suggests that's a kind of threat. You know, if you don't pay us what we want, there's going to be more rioting.
I don't think it is a threat. It's a concern, and the people I represent are really concerned about their futures. They're considering whether they should actually leave the police service as a result of those cuts and those changes. But what I have to emphasise is the dedication of the people who are on the streets tonight and have been on the streets since Thursday is without question.
Sean, what do you want from the Prime Minister tomorrow?
What I want for the Prime Minister is to let everybody know that there is a plan to sort this out. What I don't want is to jump to one conclusion and just look at things. There is a gambit of movement, a gambit of problems to look at. But what I don't want from politicians is for them to use it to forward their agenda and for other government departments to suggest if they don't get a cut, this wouldn't happen.
But do you not worry that where are these guys? I mean, why wasn't the Prime Minister back earlier? Does it not matter to you?
I think this is the thing that the media have been the most childish about. At one point, do you think that David Cameron's going to go down there with a shield and deal with the kids in Tottenham and then run over to Hackney as well? We have a mechanism in a big, sophisticated society. The police are here.
But we need leaders, don't we?
Absolutely.
And where are they?
And we have leaders. We have a Deputy Prime Minister. We have a Deputy Mayor.
Who's just come back from holiday.
Exactly. We have all manner of people to deal with it.
And a Home Secretary who's just come back from holiday.
The point is this. They are not the people.
Prime Minister who's coming back from holiday.
They are not
and
the
a
people.
Mayor of London who's coming back from holiday.
They are not the people who will put this problem right. This problem is in our communities. This problem is in our economy. What are our young people going to do for a job? What are our communities going to do to control the behaviour of our young people? If we weren't having a riot, we'd be smearing young people's name with some other violent act that they're involved in. The point is this: we have lost control of our young people, and that is our responsibility, not politicians.
Do any of you see any situation where the army could actually be involved in this?
No, the army aren't trained. I mean, I think the army's a bit overstretched in Afghanistan at the moment. I find myself suddenly agreeing with Sean. Kids have got to have the prospect of a job. At the moment, many of them, perhaps even the majority, have no guarantee that's coming. What young, mainly working class men want is to know they can have a job, which means they can support a wife and a family, and restore those sort of family values Sean's talking about. At the moment, a lot of young people coming through the system haven't got that confidence.
I raised with you before, and I want to raise it one more time, you've just got a minute or two left, the question of the Olympics. I mean, people will be very worried about the Olympics, and there's a possibility of a terrorist threat on top of that, and public order, and a lot more people who are coming to our country and we're looking for
this is why why
safety.
the politicians have to lead. Sean's right. They're not coming back to run the system. But when I was in Singapore and the bombs went off in London, I came straight
Which was
back.
when you won the Olympic bid,
yes,
where the British,
because
the London bid was won.
You've got to be there leading and articulating and reassuring. You can't do that over a phone. You've got to be on the street.
Would there, one specific question about the Duggan family, I mean, would it help if there was some kind of apology? Because they know there will be an inquiry into what happened. We will find out eventually, but we won't find out today or tomorrow or the next day. It'll take some time.
Let me be clear about this. We've got the IPCC that have now effectively had relationships, connections with the family, and that's been worked through. It's important that communities feel reassured that the IPCC will be transparent. It's important that truth gets out into communities. It's important that holistically, as Londoners, we say this should not continue. But the reality is this, until we are sure, and it is important that there is an appropriate response from the police at the point in time. If the IPCC say there's a concern, then the police need to give an appropriate response to local communities, because if trust is not there, then this can get worse, and I don't want it to.
OK, we'll leave it there. Thank you all very much. Thank you. Paul Lewis, who has followed these disturbances from the start. He's on the streets of Hackney tonight. Paul, what are you seeing in Hackney tonight?
Well, I mean, Hackney has really been perhaps some of the most shocking scenes that I've seen over the last 72 hours, really. The Pembury estate was the epicentre of things, and it was really taken over by youths, burning cars, forming flaming barricades, and really taking complete control of the estate. For about 3 hours, I would say, they had entire control of the area, and police could do nothing. I saw isolated police being attacked in their cars, people on the roof of the police car smashing it with bricks, of police officers still inside, others isolated, and of course those of journalists who are in here are also being attacked. A colleague of mine I saw thrown to the floor and beaten. It is really a shockingly chaotic situation here.
Is it actually, it sounds as if it's a lot worse than what you've been seeing last night or the night before?
Well, I think it's changed, actually, and it's very easy to talk about generalised rioting and looting, but actually what happened on Saturday night I felt was more political. Even when people were ransacking shops, they were still talking about Mark Duggan's death. Last night, again, it changed. It was property theft predominantly. No attempts at confrontations at police, but gangs roaming the streets, going from shop to shop, taking what they can. Tonight, I think it's changed again. There's a really quite sad turn in a feeling of self-destruction almost, with people destroying their own communities. And actually, one of the most disappointing things I've seen just in the last 15 minutes here in Kingsland Road, which is in the centre of Hackney, is clashes between residents. So I saw a group of about 100 Turkish Kurdish men with sticks and bottles chasing another group of youths away, saying that their shops had been looted and they were fighting back. That kind of intercommunal violence is something that I've not seen yet, and I've been here the last 3 days.
And a final thought, Paul, briefly, if I may. How orchestrated is all this, and how random? In other words, are they really using messaging and paging to get this organised in some way?
They are, absolutely. There's this kind of mythical sense that somehow Twitter and Facebook are being used. That's not the case. They're using closed networks. They're using BBM Messenger. We've, at The Guardian, set up an account to kind of receive many of these BBM messages. And these messages are kind of announcing locations and areas. They're being circulated among these closed networks on BlackBerry phones. And people are turning up. They're obviously choosing back streets and alleys before arriving at these areas. They're melting into the back streets and then reappearing at these pre-planned destinations. And so to that degree, there is a level of orchestration.
OK, Paul, thanks very much. We'll leave it there. Well, we've got some news just in that there's been looting tonight in Woolwich High Street. Several hundred young people are said to be involved. But, of course, there's nothing new in rioting in Britain. And many of today's pictures have reminded people of what happened in our inner cities in the 1980s. But are there really any useful parallels? The events are 3 decades old, but the images are still haunting. 1985's riots in the Broadwater Farm area of Tottenham were linked to the death of a black woman during a police search. Then a policeman was killed during the disturbances. Violent disorder and inner-city riots were a feature of parts of Britain in the early 80s. In Toxteth in 1981, and Brixton the same year.
It's probably Britain's worst rioting this century.
Scenes this weekend may remind us of these events, but are today's tensions as serious or as widespread as then? There are some similarities. In the early 80s, Britain had a contracting economy, high youth unemployment and government cuts. But it was also a period of sharp ideological differences between left and right and different interpretations of the cause of the unrest.
I grew up in the 30s with an unemployed father. He didn't riot. He got on his bike and looked for work.
So are the similarities superficial or even misleading? Or does the anger of the 1980s really resemble the anger of today? Is a generation too young to remember those riots experiencing new causes of resentment, or simply engaging in opportunistic criminal acts? Now, with their thoughts on what lessons, if any, we can learn from the riots of the 1980s, I'm joined by the writer Darcus Howe and the former Conservative MP and Government Minister Edwina Currie. Darcus, do you see any echoes of the 1980s?
Not echoes only, but continuation. And there are these huge moments which began in the 80s, and then we toodle along, and then another explosion. And what strikes me is the absolute ignorance of the punters, who have no idea what's going on among young blacks. They have no idea what they're thinking. They have no idea when they are about to explode.
Well, did you know? Did you have a sense that this was going to happen?
Absolutely.
Why?
I have a grandson who is 15 and who cannot count the number of times he was stopped and searched.
Ah.
And every time he tells it to you, his intonation changes. And that is what's been going on behind the backs of society, this constant stopping and searching of young blacks, gratuitously.
OK, let me bring in Edwina Currie. I mean, that is an echo of the 1980s, isn't it, Edwina?
I don't think it's anything like the 1980s. In those days, I was in Birmingham and we had riots in Handsworth, which we haven't mentioned. In those days, there was a lot of racism. It was almost respectable to be racist, and a lot of institutions were. And the youngsters, I think, in many ways, were justified in their complaint. They weren't justified in their behaviour. That's a different matter. But since then, enormous amount of effort has been put in by people like Darcus and many others that we've interviewed tonight to improve those communities and give everybody a reasonable chance. What we've got now, we heard Sean earlier call it yobbery. We've got robbery with yobbery. We've got kids who are taking the opportunity to go and steal, and they're covering it up with this kind of political cloak of invisibility. We all have to take responsibility for our actions. The police have to take responsibility for their actions, but so, I think, do these young people. Whatever their background, whatever their colour, right, they are responsible for what
Darcus,
they are doing.
I take it you accept that. They are responsible for what they're doing. There's no excuse for it. And it's not
I'm
really...
not making any excuse for you. I'm telling you, quietly and seriously, what side I'm on. Am I on the side of my grandson? Absolutely, yes. We brought him up. He's a decent fellow, constantly. At first he thinks, oh, I'm now being initiated. I said, what happened? Oh, a police has stopped me. I said, for what? You give me the 20 seconds before you stop. Nothing. And they keep doing it. It is as though they are drawn to humiliating a particular race in a particular place.
Do you not think, to pick up Edwina Currie's point, though, that things have changed a lot in the past 30 years? Racism is absolutely not respectable now, and there was a tinge of it then which was, to some people, regarded as OK. And that's gone. That has changed.
Edwina is a fine person, and she knows that I think that about her. But I would never listen to Edwina describe how much racism there is at any given society. Well, let me finish.
Yeah, go.
She has never known, and she will never know.
Edwina, you've never known, you will never know. In other words, white people probably just don't get what a 15-year-old black kid in this country feels.
With all due respect to Darkus, I think he demeans himself as a very responsible and dignified man by defending what is totally indefensible. The behaviour of the people that we've seen on the streets, whatever their background, whatever their colour, and no doubt there were all sorts involved, particularly on Saturday and over the weekend. They are destroying the communities that they live in themselves. They're destroying the businesses that are owned by black people. They're destroying the homes of black people. They're leaving people completely bereft and completely bewildered. Their own sisters, brothers, mothers, uncles and aunts. This is not the behaviour of a group of people that have any kind of morality. I think the problem is not that they're disconnected from jobs or whatever. They're disconnected from any real sense of right or wrong, any real sense that says what's mine is mine and what's yours is yours and I don't touch it. You know, these kids are saying, hey guys, we can have the trainers that my mom won't buy me. We can have the latest BlackBerry. All we got to do is go and take it and forget that there's anything wrong about doing that.
Darkus.
As a former MP, she knows where the thieves are and how many of them are in prison now. I do not wish to make a point on it, but the young blacks, fine citizens of this country to be, are constantly being persecuted by the police. I have never been on bail for 10 years of my life, and I wouldn't give up. And all I say to them, well, you will get some insurance for burning the place down, and let's go away.
Okay, we'll leave it there. Thank you both very much.